A warm good evening to all of you. First of all, at the onset, I would like to thank Metalogic PMS for organizing this congregation of like-minded people. Not very often it happens that all the industry stalwarts at one place and we're discussing about the various aspects of mining and mineral sector. Hi, I'm Abhinav Sengupta. I would like to discuss about the raw material sector and why this security is a big concern in today's world. So let's get started. Next. Okay. So the agenda would be very simple. We'll talk about the Indian mining sector. We'll talk about what are the drivers for raw material, what are the challenges it covers, what are the possible outlook for achieving the raw material security, and the final paradigm shift where India is progressing towards. So just to set an outset, a context of Indian mining sector is it's highly regulated. It is marred by gender. It is pandered by politics, and we already have highly labor intensive. So in this case, if you see the Indian mining sector, since post independence, we would see that the first era was called as nationalization, where all the major rules, acts, PSUs were being set up, and that is the place where Indian mining sector was coined as the primary sector of India. Then in 1991, we would see that Indian mining sector got reformed a bit. That era was called the liberalization, where the triggering factor was power sector reforms, and also we have the FDI in the Indian mining sector. There we have some rules coming up, like MDOs were put in place, contractual mining came over. We also have national mineral policy, national mineral exploration policy. All things was happening in those areas. Then what happened after 2014 and just 11 and 12, we have Coalgate scam. Supreme Court cancels 204 coal blocks. And apart from that, in the World Economic Forum in 2016, there was a Industry 4.0 term got coined. So because of all this impact, the Indian mining sector moves toward the commercialization. So we have seen from 2015 to 2022 onwards, that era is called the commercialization of Indian mining sector, where we have the auctioning regime coming in place, which we already discussed about. We have minor mineral auction in place. Then there was GST in mining, and all the reforms were happened. Now, this was the time where Indian mining sector was gaining ground in order to achieve, what he wanted to achieve, like raw material security and Atmanirbharta. But now the concern has come for what are the drivers for raw material security? Why raw material security is very important context. Now you have to understand this, that achieving a raw material security is a function of both. It's a function of time as well as technology technological development. A material which we look at this point of time might not be of importance in the future. So similar case, if you see the drivers, there are a huge amount of cascading impact of all the drivers, like we have COP commitment, we have in place like National Infrastructure Pipeline, National Mineral Policy, we have Atmanirbhar Bharat, PLI scheme. All these things have helped us, requiring for minerals or the raw materials in place. But on the supply side, we only have those indigenous mines in place, domestic, and then we have imports. Then there are some, alternate substitution of minerals or materials, and we have some, also some like alternative fuel resources. But all in all, there were few drivers which really impacted this entire issue of raw material security. First is we have high population. India is a highly populated country which always demand raw material consumption, and our raw material consumption for any mineral is hugely less than as compared to world average. Then we have concern regarding the infrastructure growth. We are going to grow like anything. All the raw materials will be required for infrastructure minerals. Then we have energy transition in place. We have circular economy. And also we have a concern of growing trade deficit, which we are going to reduce if we don't import. Then we have Industry 4.0. So all these drivers has helped, and the concern started of achieving the raw material security at right place at right time. But there are challenges. So apart from the price, the other things which impacts the raw material security and the challenges that that any end user is mostly concerned of is, number one is the quality of raw material. Of course, after quality there is the quantity, then the sustained supply and the logistic in place, and then there are some contractual terms. So at the same point of time, we have to keep in mind all these five are put in place properly. Then only the price will play an important role. If you don't achieve this, then there will be cascading effect on the downstream industry. We also have direct cost leakage, indirect cost leakage, and also we have lower sales revenue realization. But now the moot question comes: how are we going to achieve this? Now with the advent of first mile connectivity, last mile connectivity, technological improvement in the material handling system, there are plethora of options which has come up for achieving the raw material security. Few I have discussed here, and the more can be devised and developed with the particular permutation and combination. So if you could see on my screen, there are some 8 options like how we can achieve this raw material. Either we can do some indigenous mining, or we should import, or we should acquire some mineral asset overseas, or we should buy it from a trader or a merchant miner, or we could have it from an equity stake outside outside India. But each and every every options has their own inherent risk and challenges in place. So we could see that import, I mean, if in case of import, we could directly see that all the risk, like right from supply chain to geopolitical, all risks are very high. Like similar in case of indigenous mining, if you own the mineral assets, all the risks are minimum. So now it is very interesting to see at this stage what we have done is here. If you see on the x-axis, if you could see that there is certain minerals which we are currently producing at a lower rate, and certain minerals we are producing at a higher rate. And on the y-axis, if you could see, then there is a future demand, limited demand, and there is a high demand. So then we can bifurcate this entire chart into 4 zones: zone 1, 2, and 3 and 4. Now, surprisingly, India is currently grappling with zone 4. All the minerals which you can see, like lithium, nickel, cobalt, all the battery minerals. Then apart from that, you could see that rock phosphate, potash, all these, fertilizer minerals. They are really, we don't have much of a, resources. We don't have potash resources as such. We do have rock phosphate, but they are very limited quantity, and we are highly dependent on the import. So this is the one area where India is currently grappling with, where we highly need attention. Apart from that, if you can see on the zone number 3, steel. And when I say raw material could be, a mineral, material, or intermediaries, anything. We have steel, aluminum, bauxite, chromite, though in abundance, but we still require them in future because there is a demand as we are going to grow. Then we have certain mineral like in zone 2, I have put up, coke, a normal coal, a thermal coal, because we presume that after 2030, the demand for coal will come down. We'll have a gas-based economy in place, and we'll be, slowly and progressively replacing the requirement of coal. So now the challenge is to devise a right approach for all these zones. So if you could see, let's discuss quickly. If you could see that for the zone number 1, where we already have a low production in place and we already have low import requirement, then what we can do, we can either have indigenous mining in place, or we can do some kind of bilateral agreements, or we can use some kind of alternate, mechanism. Like in the previous slide, you have seen there is a uranium in place. So we could get away with the uranium in place of thorium. India have a huge resource of thorium. How about going and explore thorium and replace the uranium need? Then in the zone number 3, we already have all the abundance of mineral, like we have, we have chromite, manganese, iron ore, but we still require them in future. So in that case, what we can do the congregation, or we can do the, grouping of the larger producer, and then in case of any raw material supply risk, we can manage that. Similarly, in zone number 2, where we have, abundance of mineral, but we don't require them large enough in the future, then in that case, what we do, we can have some tie-ups, we can have some strategic tie-ups, or what we can do, we can, some small regional association players can come up, and then on the regional basis, they can do the demand-supply mismatch, so that we should not go and import. And at last, zone number 4, where there is a major problem is, so in this case, India is currently grappling, and they are going ahead with the imports. And the other part, what they are doing is they are going to go ahead with the acquisition of a mineral asset outside India. So that will help them, reducing the cost as well as curtailing some kind of risk, mainly the interest rate risk. So again, summarizing the entire case, what we have, we could see that there are minerals like battery minerals, fertilizers, and we have, electronic minerals. They can mostly fall in the place where we need to import them, number 1. And number 2, we need to have a strategic acquisition of the mineral asset outside India. While the minerals for nuclear and for thermal coal, we can go ahead with the owning and operating own mines. And at the same time, what we can do some kind of strategic arrangements and agreements. So now, if you see the entire statistics, and in that case, this time period, 2020 to 2022, was the era of reforms, where Indian mining sector has gone beyond leaps and bounds, and you have seen that there was a ease of doing business. There was laws regarding sustainable mining. There was laws regarding the digital impact, and also there was a policy regarding the logistics. But this has been, number of laws have been changed. Earlier in the morning, somebody was already mentioning that number of changes, number of reforms happened within 1 year or 2. So this era we would call as a era of reform. But next, the now era, that is 2023 to 2030, we want to have the raw material security in place for all the minerals like battery, fertilizer, infrastructure, energy transition, that is copper also. We all require these minerals. then only after 2030 we will be very much poised to say and believe that we would be achieving self-sufficiency through having a downstream industry in place. Number one, we'll have a minimum import so that our fiscal deficit and trade deficit should not go haywire. We should have a sustainable mining, which is a very important term in place. So this will only happen if we progress through this second phase. Lastly, I would like to summarize this, that concern of raw material, it was started as a bushfire, but now it is going to spread across the world like a forest conflagration, which we are finding difficult to extinguish. So with this, I would like to end this. Thank you.